And at number 10, Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy. While Spider-Man is one of Marvel's biggest superheroes and is quite beloved to readers, that doesn't mean he hasn't been victim to some pretty cringe-worthy writing over the years. One of those cases left us with a terrible aftertaste. It was this unfortunate and unexpected pairing, Gwen Stacy and Peter's arch-nemesis, who is sometimes an anti-hero but not really all that often, Norman Osborn. It was the product of a bit of retconning. Turns out that prior to Gwen Stacy's tragic demise, Osborn had hooked up with her, a reveal that unravels itself in the Sins Past storyline in Amazing Spider-Man between issues 509 and 514. Peter discovers that Gwen was cheating on him with Osborn, that she ended up getting pregnant and then broke off the affair. Osborn was pissed, and that was his intention for going after her in the night Gwen Stacy died in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 121 in 1973. Turns out she had given birth to a baby though, which actually was twins, not just one baby, who then would become assassins who tried to kill Parker. Worst part is, it was MJ who revealed a good chunk of this story to Peter, having known some of the details for quite some time. And at number 9, Mystique and AZAZEL. Mystique has had some memorable and meaningful relationships in the past, but her weird fling with demon AZAZEL was not one of them. Essentially, AZAZEL was a demon who had been banished to another dimension, and the only way that he could return to Earth was by having kids with various lovers. Right. So he slept around a bunch in Uncanny X-Men issue 433 in 2004, a story that gives us a more in-depth look at Nightcrawler. So yeah, you probably know where this is going. Anywho, the demon slept with Mystique in Germany, who at the time was hitched to another dude the name of Christian Wagner. AZAZEL, ever the shining example of fatherhood, was gone faster than Nightcrawler could ever teleport, that's for sure, leaving her to raise the baby who she named Kurt all on her own. Then, to make this romance one for the books, years before this was even revealed, we found out that Mystique had actually killed her husband at the time, Christian Wagner, because she thought he was up to no good himself. Trust issues, anybody? I mean, can you blame her? And at number 8, Dick Grayson and Helena Wayne. Dick and Helena were a weird pairing. Now, Helena is the child of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle from Earth 2, and at first glance her relationship with Dick kinda makes sense. Grayson falls for the daughter of his mentor, it's a bit of a forbidden romance, the two of them are into that. But what really makes it weird is the fact that the two of them practically grew up together, looking at each other as siblings. I mean, maybe if you look at this through the lens of like a bad romantic comedy, that isn't that weird. But what is kinda weird is things that these two say to one another when discussing their relationship. Like this classic gem. Helena says to Dick, "And I am a big girl now, you know?" To which he replies, "I noticed. That's why I went to the far side of this ventilator. Even though I diapered you when you were a baby, I assume my peaking privileges expired years ago." Ew, what the hell, Dick Grayson, that's gross. It's crap like that that made them destined to fail, if we're being perfectly honest. And at number 7, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. These two were always a kinda odd couple from the get-go, but to many they're each other's OTP since they have been attracted to one another pretty much from when Kitty was first introduced into the comics in Uncanny X-Men back in the early 80s. Now at the time, Jean Grey was gone, so Kitty ended up getting a lot of attention as the new girl on the team, with her romantic relationship with Colossus becoming the romance of the series for a while. But this is where it gets a little odd. It's the fact that these two actually have a pretty significant age gap. When Kitty first joined the X-Men, she's supposed to be around 14 years old. 14. And Colossus? Well, he's almost 20 years her senior. Chris Claremont, who was penning Uncanny X-Men at the time, had been pretty open about how he felt. That two individuals can love each other regardless of age. I mean, it's a nice sentiment, except for the fact that it's generally a good idea to not date someone who isn't of legal age, especially if you've got 18 or so years on them. Just saying. That being said, that was something that was explored in the comic, with Colossus refusing to sleep with her because of her age. But they're still making out lots, so… And at number 6, AVIAX and a dinosaur. What's a weird romance list without a little bestiality? Yep, that's a thing I just said. Rather than go the route of Supergirl f***ing her horse, which is a real thing and definitely gonna make it onto our part 3 of this list, we decided to go with a more absurd entry this time around. None other than AVIAX and his dinosaur lover pal. So AVIAX is a member of the galactic superhero team, the Wanderers, who has the ability to transform his body into any creature of flight that his imagination can whip up. This includes dragons, friends, but usually it's birds. In 1988, in Wanderers issue 12, the team would end up on a planet filled with dinosaurs that was headed towards extinction via radioactive fog. AVIAX comes up with a plan to save the dinosaurs to ensure that evolution still occurs. What's his great idea? Well, he suggests that they have sex with them to pass along their genetic immunity to the fog. Actually, sounds more like an excuse to bang a dinosaur if you're asking me. So he tells the team, and the majority of them are like pretty traumatized by the idea, except for those two kinky f***s over there who are like, this could actually work. And they have a weird grin on their face. It's just, no, bad panel. Anywho, AVIX does it, but the team never actually check in to see if this genetic experiment experiment even panned out. So yeah, it was all just an excuse to dinosaur. Now, to be fair, he transformed into a prehistoric dinosaur himself when he gets it on with a female of the same species, but hey, look at the cover of this issue and tell me that that makes it any better. Right, didn't think it did. Moving on to number 5, Thanos and Lady Death. Okay, sure, this relationship is a bit one-sided. It's also Thanos and the entity of death, which is a really interesting person to fall in love with, or rather, entity. So the reason why Thanos does anything that he ever does in the comics for the most part, or at least earlier on, is the fact that he is in love with Death and trying to court her. We're talking the entity Death, who presents herself as a lady. So, he sees the Cosmic Cube to prove that he loved her. Did it work? No. In the Infinity Gauntlet story arc, Thanos wipes out half of the universe to prove that he's worthy of her love. She doesn't buy it. In between fighting off the heroes of the galaxy in that same story arc, Death ignores him. Death never gives him an answer to any of his questions. She often rolls her eyes at him. He gets more and more frustrated. But that being said, she hasn't always given him the cold shoulder though. But usually any kind of affection or attention Thanos has gotten from her has typically been because Death has used him for something. She gave him powers, but then he kind of went and ruined his chances by attempting to go above and beyond by collecting all of the Infinity Gems. So you can see why she'd probably get annoyed. He has long portions of cringe dialogue in the Infinity Gauntlet arc where he goes on about how he isn't worthy of her. It's actually kind of a riot. But perhaps the most entertaining aspect of the relationship involves the love triangle with our next number, and at number 4, Deadpool and Lady Death. If you thought Thanos and Lady Death were odd, Deadpool and Death is even stranger, although weirdly compatible and kinda works. So Death met Deadpool initially during Wade's torture at the hands of Dr. Killbrew and Ajax at the Weapon X facility. He fell in love with her, and funny enough, those feelings are reciprocated. She shares his sense of humor, believe it or not. Thanos gets wind of Deadpool making moves on Death later on, shenanigans ensue, and eventually the Mad Titan uses a T-Ray to curse Deadpool with an ancient artifact that makes him unable to die. He becomes immortal, so he can never truly have death in the end. Eventually, Thanos does end up getting with Death, sort of, and they have a kid named Rot. Aww. Who they then destroy. Talk about love. And at number 3, Scarlet Witch and Vision. Much like in the MCU, Scarlet Witch and Vision have a thing. Except, in the comics, that thing turns into marriage, which then turned into divorce and heartbreak. Yep. So let's backtrack a sec here. Both of these heroes were members of the Avengers when they started dating. Vision is a robot. The two of them would go on to have children who were twins, who they would name William and Thomas. Vision is a robot. Surprise, surprise, turns out the twins were actually fragments of villain Mephisto's soul that Wanda, thanks to her extremely powerful abilities, had turned into babies. Wanda's mind was then erased to prevent her from the pain of losing her kids, which is something that didn't remain intact because she would then turn on the Avengers because of it, losing her mind and killing Vision, the robot. But because he is a robot, he's never really truly dead now, is he? Anywho, the two didn't last, something that Roy Thomas, who had written for the Avengers, seemingly didn't mind. Since he's openly admitted that the only reason the pair were ever together was because the team needed a couple. But if her number 1 spot is any, sign of that, surely that's not for the best. More on that later though. Vision would go on to appear in a Tom King written solo series that explored his life after Wanda, in which he strived for a private life of normalcy by creating a family of robots for himself, because he is a robot. Which included a robot wife that he modeled after Scarlet Witch to an extent. It was weird. Despite how unsettling that comes across, it's actually one of the better comics written about Vision, and he's quite the character study. And our number 2 spot, Cyclops and Emma Frost. Cyclops and Jean Grey's relationship is perhaps one of the most problematic relationships in the history of comic books. It does have its ups though. But we are not going there today. Oh no. Instead, we are going to turn to Jean's rival, Emma Frost, and look at the weird that went down between her and Scott when Scott was still technically with Jean. And by technically, I mean married. I mean, it's not cheating if you're f***ing someone in your mind, right? Well, that's exactly the logic these two went with. And it's exactly what happened when Scott and Emma first started getting close. Emma was meant to help Scott recover from some previous trauma that he had endured, and in the process was going into his mind using her psychic abilities. Initially, it started off as telepathic therapy, but then became a full-blown affair with Emma making herself appear like Jean and then having sex with Scott in her mind. Something that began as a role-playing exercise to help Scott. Which, I'm sorry, is just really weird, especially when Jean enters Emma's mind and finds them in bed together with Emma dressed up as her. Like, I'm sorry, how do you talk your way out of that one, Scott? Really? And finally, in at number 1, Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. Despite the fact that the MCU has portrayed these two as a long-lost romance finally reunited, the fact of the matter is, Hank and Janet have had a really turbulent romantic history together throughout the comics, something that you bet your butt will never see adapted up on the big screen. While there's a whole lot of unfortunate circumstances that have occurred between them, often due to the mismanagement of Hank's mental health. Perhaps the biggest incident worth bringing up on our list is the time that Hank beat Janet in Avengers issue 213. Now at the time, Hank was operating under the alias of Yellowjacket, a period when he was suffering from schizophrenia, had taken on the Yellowjacket persona, forgetting who he was, and then eventually remembered that he was Hank. Then, with the Avengers, acted out of line and senselessly beaten up a foe of the Avengers who had surrendered. When he was put on trial for it by Captain America and about to get kicked off the team, Hank came up with a scheme to build a robot to fight the Avengers that only he could step in and defeat, showing them how important he was to the team overall. Janet did not think this was a good idea, which resulted in Hank beating her when she attempted to stop him. Because of this, he has gone down in history as a bit of a wife beater. Jim Shooter, who wrote the issue, claimed that Hank striking Janet was never actually intentional, and was due to a miscommunication between him and artist Bob Hall for taking his direction to the extreme and having Hank hit her. Sure, Janet would eventually leave Hank for a while afterwards. Now this isn't the only time their relationship has been toxic. The Ultimates version of these two is pretty damn awful, with Hank literally trying to murder Janet at one point. Regardless, you can see why the romance gets the top spot on our list.
Number 10. Black Widow and the Hulk. Maybe the only one on this list that is weird in a cute way. For this relationship, we have to turn to the MCU, as Black Widow and the Hulk have never got it on in the comics. Probably why this screen romance caught so many off guard. In fact, I feel like most of us were expecting Hawkeye and Black Widow to get together, as this is a relationship that happened in the comics. When we turn to Scarlett Johansson and Mark Ruffalo to ask more about their characters, they say that the two have a lot more in common than people would initially think. Both characters often feel as though they are monsters, and it is this self-reflection that grounds their relationship and really allows them to connect. They see parts of themselves in each other, and see in each other the potential to transcend their monstrous sides of themselves. I think they both inspire each other to be better. So although it is a weird couple to ship, Hulk Tasha is also kinda sweet and great. You just gotta run with this one.
What are you doing?
I'm running with it. With you.
Number 9. Bucky Barnes and Gail Richards, aka Captain America's fiance. Turning to Good Old Earth 1610 and the Ultimates 2002 series, we discover that there is a reality where Bucky Barnes ended up marrying his best friend Steve's fiance, Gail Richards. After Steve Rogers went MIA in the war, Bucky and Gail apparently hooked up, got married, and had 4 children. Needless to say, everyone in that love triangle was a little perturbed when Steve returned years later. Sounds like an awkward situation. Number 8. Any relationship involving Venom. Let's boil this down. If you are dating Eddie Brock when he's Venom, you're not just dating Eddie Brock, you are dating a symbiote. Congratulations. Venom is a character that is very interesting because they are in a relationship with whoever they are bonded to, and then inviting someone else into that relationship, let's just say things can get weird really quickly. Cut to all of the babies Venom has had and how weird that was. Not to mention, Venom just has a weird kinda icky sexy quality. It's not necessarily Venom's fault, they were just drawn that way. The muscles, the tongue, it's just kind of a lot. There are a lot of really twisted takes on romantic moments involving Venom in the comics. Don't believe me? Check New Avengers Annual 3 from 2005, where Venom sexy interrogates Clint Barton, and the intense deadly French kiss the Thing receives from Venom in Venom issue 11 from 2003. Not to mention Eddie Brock and Venom's somewhat unhealthy codependent relationship, which we constantly get examples of in comics, cartoons, and film. Number 7. Doc Ock and Aunt May. This relationship could only exist in the 1963 series The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 131. In this issue, Doc Ock is about to marry Aunt May when Spider-Man shows up to put a stop to it. Although Doc Ock only wants to marry Aunt May because she just inherited a nuclear facility from a dead relative. I know. Weird thing to inherit. Despite this, Doc Ock is actually quite nice to Aunt May, which makes this relationship even weirder. It's also weird because other Spider-Man villains show up wanting to kidnap May instead and steal her away from Doc Ock, which is what Doc Ock could have done, but instead he chose to woo and marry her? Talk about a weird storyline and relationship. Number 6. Steve Rogers and Sharon Carter. Yep. Steve Rogers decides to date Sharon Carter, who while originally in the comics was Peggy's younger sister, has now been established in Marvel as Peggy's great niece. This was changed to help the timeline seem more logical and make more sense, cause, you know, aging. What isn't logical is the idea of these two dating. Although Sharon is an agent working for S.H.I.E.L.D., shares similar interests with Cap, and looks like Peggy Carter, does not mean these two should hook up. It's just, well, creepy. I could go into more detail, but I figured I'd leave the rest to MCU Peggy herself, actress Hayley Atwell, who is quoted saying it best. Hayley is reported saying, "I just feel that, I wouldn't want to date my great aunt's guy. It just feels like it crosses an incestuous boundary. And Peggy just died. That's even more disrespectful, right? It's like, don't touch that. You can't tap that." Number 5. Batman and Batgirl. A lot of controversy around these two, although I cannot deny that there are sparks on screen with them sometimes. Despite that, this relationship still feels forced. Where they have always been portrayed as having a father-daughter relationship in the comics, lately something weird has been brewing between them in Gotham. The two weirdest parts of this relationship are number 1, Batgirl aka Barbara Gordon's romantic relationship with Dick Grayson happening at the same time. This is explored even more in the Batman Beyond 2.0 comic series, where we find out Batgirl was cheating on Dick with Batman and became pregnant as a result. The second weirdest being the age disparity and mentorship between Bruce and Barbara. Not to mention, Barbara is the daughter of Batman's friend, James Gordon. Just ick. Number 4. Black Widow and Ivan Petrovich. Another creepy father-daughter relationship gone wrong. Ivan Petrovich is Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow's adopted father. He saved her after she was thrown from a burning building and took her to the Red Room, where she was trained and grew up to be an amazingly skilled assassin. Ivan follows Black Widow seemingly everywhere and always makes an effort to aid her and keep her safe. However, he also consistently tries to flirt with her and put creepy moves on her. He even professes his love to her, and after she spurns his advances, confessing she will only ever love him as a father, he goes crazy and turns himself into a monster-like cyborg. Talk about a drama queen. Number 3. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have always loved each other, but no, really loved each other. This was a romance never explicitly talked about in the comics, but merely alluded to in the looks the brother and sister duo gave each other, the way they held each other, and some of the things that they said. But being kids to Magneto couldn't have been easy, and maybe those looks and maybe those touches could have been explained simply by them feeling as though they were the only real family they had. Maybe that is why they're also so protective of each other. Nope. Just kidding, because then the 2002 Ultimate Series surfaced, which pretty much all in all confirmed what we'd all been speculating. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, Pietro and Wanda, brother and sister, are in a relationship, and they have been in love with each other since they were kids. So, yeah. And if you think that's bad, that's not even the worst of them. Number 2. Harley Quinn and the Joker. The relationship to almost end all weird relationships, but not quite. Harley Quinn and the Joker have had a messy and abusive on and off again relationship throughout their history together. Harley was actually only kept on in the comic world because she was so popular with the fans. Joker was originally written as a sociopath that only cared about him and himself and never anyone else, which makes it hard for him to date. Although throughout the animated series, multiple comic book series, and on the big screen, we do get genuine moments of affection between these two, there is always a push to follow the pull. Joker has difficulty enjoying the vulnerable parts of himself that Harley brings out. Joker sees Harley as a weakness and is always attempting to eliminate her at all costs, with constant attempts of him trying to murder her being shown in the comics and cartoons.
You always take shots from folks who just don't get the joke.
And Harley always comes back to him because she is codependent and possibly suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, or hybristophilia. Hybristophilia would make the most sense considering her other partners, as it is the attraction to those who have done something bad. Cue Deadshot and Poison Ivy. Though lately Harley has been actively trying to stay away from Mr. J, and thankfully this destructive duo have become somewhat less inseparable than they once were. Number 1. ARISIA Robb and Hal Jordan. A relationship between two Green Lanterns seems normal until we realize this was a big brother, little sister type relationship. In the comics, ARISIA originally is written as an admirer of Hal's. She idolizes him. Then she has a crush on him. Then she's in love with him? She professes her love, to which Hal originally rebukes her for, claiming she is too young for him, specifically pointing out that she is half his age. Eventually, she manages to age herself accidentally, both mentally and physically, using her own willpower and the aid from her Green Lantern ring. Still, Hal says he feels it is wrong. but apparently doesn't really fully mean that, as they still end up together anyway. The beginning of this relationship is followed with a lot of exposition in the comics, explaining why this relationship is really a-okay. And even after the writers changed for the comic series, the relationship somehow was allowed to be continued. When the two finally broke it off, it didn't even predominantly have to do with the age issue. I'm not sure what was weirder, the fact that this was written, or the fact that everyone was seemingly so okay with it. Number 10. Rogue and Sentry. You know I love the Sentry, but when he was retconned into comic lore, not everything that came with his history was great. Namely his relationship that apparently happened with Rogue. In Sentry Fallen Sun, all the supers are gathered at Robert and Lindy's grave. The epitaph on their joint tombstone under their names even reads, "Together forever." Such a sweet sentiment. But in this comic, we learn that apparently Sentry's power made him immune to Rogue's power absorbing abilities, meaning that she was able to touch him without any fear. She confesses this, bursts into tears, and runs off as everybody is sharing memories that they had with Sentry, leaving Cyclops to pretty much confirm that Rogue and Sentry were intimate. Apparently Rogue had just confessed this to her X-Men family on the way over, but Robert was of course married to Lindy, which means I guess he cheated on his wife with Rogue? Unless this happened before they were married? Anyways, it's a really weird wrench to just throw into Rogue's already challenging sex life. She doesn't have enough problems, jeez. Wonder if Lindy knew and was cool with it. Maybe Lindy was there, who knows? Oh my gosh, now I'm imagining all these things. Number 9. Homelander and BECCA Butcher. While BECCA might not be a superhero herself, and some would see Homelander as a supervillain, Vought would obviously have us believe otherwise. While BECCA's story is a lot darker in the comics, things are still taken too far with her in the television series based off the comics. In the comics and the series, Billy believes that BECCA has been raped by Homelander, which ultimately caused her death. It's his motivation for vengeance on the supers. However, in the television series they take it in a different direction. Instead, in the show, BECCA was actually having an affair with Homelander and she managed to give birth to the child that they conceived together. Whether she lives or dies, the relationship is definitely taken too far. But in the television series, I would say the relationship is even more shocking as it leaves BECCA in a very bizarre position where she also seems still pretty terrified of Homelander even though she had an affair with him. And this also shatters Billy's motivation and it leaves the audience wanting to know more. It's just well written. Just a cool twist. Twisty twist. Number 8. Black Widow and Spider-Man. Okay, so this relationship that I'm talking about is from one panel. But trust me, this one panel is the only one you will need for these two. I'm of course referring to the little one-shot panels in What If Volume 1 issue 34. I love these one-shot little panels of what ifs. Like, what if Dazzler had decided to become a lawyer? Or what if Dr. Doom had a sense of humor? The panel I'm specifically talking about though poses the daydream of what if Spider-Man had married the Black Widow, which apparently would have resulted in cannibalism. Burp. All you really need to say about that. Cannibalism is always too far. When you've gone there, you can't go back, because one of you is probably dead. Number 7. Gambit and Mystique. So while this relationship didn't specifically go anywhere, the attempt in and of itself was so messed up that I actually had to mention it. In the comic series X-Men, Gambit ends up becoming attracted to X-Men student Fox while he's with Rogue. He does his best to avoid Fox and remain loyal, truly wanting to be with Rogue and Rogue only, but still Rogue ends up feeling insecure and getting jealous. I mean, if you couldn't touch your one true love, but everyone else was able to, I'm sure you would feel pretty insecure too. While jealousy is not necessarily abnormal when it comes to any relationship, and nothing happens between Gambit and Fox, it is later revealed that this wasn't even Fox, but was actually Mystique in disguise. That's what takes this too far. Mystique sees Rogue as a daughter, and Rogue sees Mystique as her adoptive mother, and yet apparently Mystique claims she was hitting on Gambit for Rogue's own good, trying to prove that he wasn't good enough for Rogue, to protect her daughter. You know, disapproving of your child's partner is one thing, trying to sleep with said partner to prove your point is kind of another. Kinda gross. Don't do that. Number 6. Black Widow and Iron Man. In the Ultimates universe, Black Widow is not a very super person. She ends up being a spy working with the Liberators to betray the Avengers and clear a way for the Liberators' invasion. But even if we don't go into that whole plot point, Tony and Natasha still manage to take it too far. Tony and Natasha start dating, and shortly after, Tony proposes to her. He trusts his new bride a little too much, even gifting her her very own set of Iron Man armor. Even after the betrayal comes up and Black Widow is killed by Hawkeye, we later find out that Tony and Natasha had a sex tape. Yeah, they made a sex tape, which ends up getting circulated after Natasha's death. For this relationship being taken too far, I really blame the Ultimates universe. But to be honest, Ultimates often takes everything a little too far. It's what we both love and hate about it. Number 5. Gambit and Belladonna. This star-crossed love story ends very badly for one of these two, but in all, it's pretty much tragic all around. Before Gambit fell in love with Rogue, he had a childhood sweetheart, Belladonna Boudreaux. The two became friends when they were little, not knowing that they came from rival guilds, the Thieves Guild and the Assassins Guild. Over the year, the rivalry became ever more violent, and as such, their fathers arranged a marriage between the two, which they hoped would help to bring both guilds together in harmony. However, soon after they were married, Bella's brother challenged Remy to a duel. I think you can see where we're going here. The Romeo and Juliet mirrored story of their love ended up leaving Remy banished, and Bella mistaken for dead, though we later found out that she was just in a coma. Things only got worse for Bella from there. She was revived, but Rogue accidentally touched her, which caused Bella to lose all of her memories. This caused Gambit to leave her, and he would end up leaving Bella more than once. Ouch. Guess Belladonna was no Rogue for him, sadly. Number 4. Lady Shiva and David Kane. This relationship went too far right from the beginning. Before Lady Shiva was Lady Shiva, she was Sandra Wusan, a practiced martial artist who performed and trained with her sister Carolyn. David Kane, member of the League of Assassins, came to watch them perform one time and felt that Carolyn was holding Sandra back. Believing Sandra to be his true soulmate, he kindly killed Carolyn for her. This obviously upset Sandra dramatically, who swore vengeance for her sister's death. She tracked Kane down, but was ambushed by the League of Assassins. She was defeated, and it was then that she realized just how much her sister had held her back. Kane offered to spare her life if she would agree to bear his child and leave the baby for him to raise. And Sandra agreed. Pretty weird. She trained with the League and set out an hour after her baby was born. Only within the League of Assassins could this weird story be conceived. But hey, we got Cassandra Cain out of it, so Number 3. AVIAX and a dinosaur. Sounds so ridiculous just even reading that. The comic series The Wanderers saw this really odd pairing happen. The Wanderers are a cosmic superhero team who were created to be a group of allies to the superhero team the Legion of Superheroes. They are tasked with helping to save a species on a prehistoric planet filled with dinosaurs where everything is going extinct. To ensure the diversity of the species on the planet despite mass extinction and protect the life there, AVIAX, who is a shapeshifter, comes up with the brilliant idea to mate with a bird-like dinosaur, passing on his genes, which are immune to the radioactive fog that appears to be attacking the planet. Most of the team are on board with this brilliant plan, and so AVIAX does just that. Sure, he's saving a species, but also they leave before ever confirming that this actually works. It does end up working, of course, and we the readers know that, but as soon as this deed is done, AVIAX just runs back to his teammates. The comics even go into the whole mating ritual between AVIAX and the dinosaur. No. It's really weird. Number 2. Cable and Copycat. Cable and Domino become a really big deal in the comics. Their relationship echoed that of other famous and adorable mutant couples like Gambit and Rogue or Jean and Scott. The two became quickly inseparable, and this would have been all well and good until the writers decided that this was not actually Domino, but shapeshifter Copycat in her guise. Copycat had actually been tasked with blowing up X-Force's headquarters and killing Cable, but during her time as Domino, she kinda became fond of him, cause you know, they had a whole relationship. Deadpool was then sent to confirm that Copycat followed through on her orders. This resulted in Copycat's betrayal being revealed, though she still attempted to protect her teammates. Despite her trying to help, X-Force headquarters was blown up, with both Copycat and X-Force actually getting away. But while physically he was intact, these events shattered Cable's emotional life for a little while. Poor Cable. Number 1. Miss Marvel and Marcus. Sorry friends, we're going there. To the Avengers issue 200, where we shockingly discovered that Miss Marvel was unknowingly pregnant. After the delivery and telling her fellow teammates that she felt used and confused in regards to this newborn baby and how it came about, her son grows rapidly into an adult man. He calls himself Marcus, and this man reveals the story of his origins, telling a story of how he was Immortus's and an unnamed woman's son. The unnamed woman herself looked a lot like Carol. Creepy. He found himself trapped in limbo after his mother left and his father vanished. So he came up with a plan to escape. He found a woman from Earth who he felt attracted to as she resembled his mother. That's actually in the comics. I'm not kidding. This woman ended up being Carol Danvers herself. He attempted to woo her, but when she resisted his charms, he was forced to use his powers to make her fall in love with him. Obviously. The two had some weird non-consensual space sex where Marcus impregnated Miss Marvel with his essence. He returned Miss Marvel to Earth, where he was then born from her. Not belonging to this realm of existence, things start getting really weird on Earth because of his presence. So he decides that he actually has to return to Limbo, realizing that he does not belong on Earth and that mayhaps he was destined to forever be alone. Conflicted, as her mind is still kinda brainwashed, Carol feels like maybe she should return with Marcus, as she still feels the effects of his influence, and says that she feels even closer to him because he is also now her son. Because he's also now her son! The Avengers stand aside and bid Carol adieu, letting her ride off into the sunset with her rapist. Don't worry though, the X-Men do come to her aid after she manages to escape Marcus, and she rightfully gets to chew out the Avengers for willfully abandoning her. The story is so messed up. Number 10. Venom and Eddie Brock. I figured I would throw you a bromance of sorts too on this list, with Eddie Brock and his relationship with his symbiotic friend Venom. Though really the two of them together are truly Venom. True love. The thing that really makes these two pretty nuts together isn't even that one of them is technically an alien entity. It is the codependency. When we look at relationships objectively, you want to have a certain sense of self. There should be you, your partner's self, and the relationship. In a sense, all sort of separate entities. With symbiosis, we don't get this. Heck, the two entities have even admitted their need and love of one another to feel that they are complete. And they have basically had 2 children together. And if you think Eddie has no part in the reproduction of a symbiote, check out Venom issues 164 and 165. The symbiote needs Eddie and his sweet love chemicals to live, and Eddie is pretty much straight up addicted to Venom, believing that Venom makes him a better person. While I know the two have been villainous together in the past, ultimately Venom is at this point an anti-hero, with even his newest film introducing him as such, an unconventional violent hero that just loves tater tots and chocolate. While my partner and I also love tater tots and chocolate, we do not need one another to literally survive. So, seems like a bad idea. Codependency is just not a good way to go in a relationship. Number 9. Black Widow and the Hulk. For some reason the MCU felt like this was a good relationship to establish, giving Natasha the kind of soothing effect on Bruce that his cousin Jennifer Walters in the comics is sometimes able to have, with Natasha and Bruce having a similar connection comparable to Jen and Bruce's connection. I mean, it's not like Natasha and Bruce are incestuous in any means, as they're not related, but the implications that come out of the similarity of these relationships are problematic. People had also dubbed the pairing Hulk-Tasha, mashing up Bruce's superhero persona of the Green Giant with just straight up plain Natasha, is so wrong on so many levels in terms of what you are then led to imagine and picture. I'm not going to get explicit here, but you know what I mean. This relationship also seemingly came out of nowhere. It is not based on any comic book lore. As such, the MCU has to justify it a bit, leading us to this scene between Bruce and Natasha talking about how they feel like they are both monsters. The most problematic thing is that being a monster in this scene equals not being able to have kids, highlighting not the fact that Natasha is a monster because she's an assassin, but because she is sterile. This whole scene is just really odd. This whole relationship is really odd. Like, they sell it well, but I don't know if we ever really needed it. Number 8. Mystique and Professor X. These two are presented in the X-Men prequel films as having a father-daughter relationship, which is hugely problematic if you are familiar with these two in the comics. Professor X and Mystique have often been presented as foes, and even sometimes allies or childhood friends in the comics. Mystique's origins actually are widely mysterious. We know a lot about her, but we don't know exactly how old she is, or even all the things that she has done. We do know, however, that she was married to Professor X. Yeah, that's right. And while under the guise of Moira McTaggart, had his son. I would be almost willing to accept this random happenstance of romance had it actually been explained in the comics. But it's really not. It's offhandedly referenced in Uncanny X-Men and Battle of Atom, where we meet Charles Xavier II, their son. But that's it. If you don't believe me that these two took it too far, just think about the name of their son. Like, Charles Xavier II? Really? So unimaginative. Why even have them hook up? What's the point? Mystique has had many relationships over the years, including a strange one with Sabretooth, but one of my actual favorites has been her long-time relationship with fellow mutant Destiny, who has the power to see future possibilities. The more nearer the possibility, the better her sight. I love them together. I wish they could have taken it further. Number 7. Silk Spectre and Dr. Manhattan. Aw, but it's such a sweet relationship. It really isn't. In the comics, Silk Spectre is just a teenager when she pursues a relationship with Dr. Manhattan. She's 16! And Dr. Manhattan at the time is a grown man in his 30s, and beyond that he's kind of a god. And this all happens much to the displeasure of Laurie's mother. The film adaptation simply had Carla Gugino, the actress who plays her, look a touch younger using some makeup, making their initial attraction feel less creepy than it is. Beyond the fact that Silk Spectre is a teenager, the two end up together for 20 years, while Dr. Manhattan continues to grow ever distant. The fact that they stayed together for that long blows my mind. Manhattan was already very disconnected from humanity when he met Laurie. I can't imagine what maintaining a relationship for that long with one another was like for either of them. Like, just let it go. Number 6. Iron Man and Black Widow. Wow. Where to start with these two? They're kind of a big deal in the Ultimate Universe. The two hook up to the disapproval of Tony's butler Jarvis, and rightly so. But we'll get to the why in a moment. A highlight from them taking things too far is the fact that they made a sex tape, and that it also got released, and that it was also in circulation after Tony was betrayed by Natasha, who was apparently using him this entire time to get her hands on tech, double-crossing not just Tony but the entirety of the USA, when she revealed that she was actually still working as a Russian spy. She even shocks Tony, who seems amazed, but she just laughs it off, mocking him for not suspecting the Russian spy to double-cross him. Obviously he wouldn't suspect that, you weren't a Russian spy at the time, he thought. And Jarvis was right not to trust her, not just because of this betrayal, but because this betrayal also led to his death. That's right, Natasha kills Jarvis. Cruel. Ultimate Universe, yeesh. Number 5. Supergirl and Comet. The stories we used to tell in comics. Remember that time that Supergirl dated her horse? Yeah. Supergirl used to travel around with her horse Comet, who used to be a centaur until he wanted to become a man and asked Circe for help, but Circe gave him a potion that transformed him into a horse instead. He followed Supergirl back to Earth one day in horse form and communicated with her telepathically while accompanying her on missions as her super horse. Anyways, he ended up meeting a wizard who was able to grant him the power to transform back into a man whenever a comet passed over his head. I know, it's really oddly specific. Comet had always loved Supergirl, and so once he had transformed into a man, he used his form as an opportunity to get closer to her. The thing that really makes this couple weird and too much is that Comet decided to withhold that he was actually Supergirl's horse, fearing that she would reject him. Instead, he just smirks about it whenever he kisses her. Tee-hee, so funny. Oh my goodness. Number 4. ARISIA and Hal Jordan. ARISIA was a young girl when she first met Hal Jordan. She inherited her spot on the Green Lanterns Corps through her family, being the 5th person from the family to join the Green Lanterns. She initially meets Hal and develops a bit of a crush, with Hal seeing ARISIA like his little kid sister. Everything from there got really weird with her and Hal, when she was reassigned with some fellow Green Lanterns to Earth and started crushing super hard on him. She subconsciously uses her power ring to alter her age and claims that she now not only looks like a grown woman, but has the mind of a grown woman as well. How can this be wrong, this love I feel for you? This somehow changes everything, and although Hal originally has some hang-ups about starting a relationship with ARISIA, because she's really still kind of a young woman, he ultimately gives in to his desire for her. Well, it seems like the writers decided after introducing ARISIA they just wanted her to be an older character, an older Green Lantern. Instead of just writing her out and writing in an actual older character to play his love interest, they made this relationship super weird. One of the most disturbing things is that it is also implied that the pair do have sex, and none of the other Green Lanterns seem to see anything wrong with their relationship. Some of them actually encourage it to the point that it's creepy, like when Guy spikes everyone's drinks at New Year's. Why? Number 3. Ant-Man and the Wasp. The comic version of these two are far less sweet than their MCU counterparts. Why this relationship went really as far as it did is beyond me. The two fell in love while on a mission to avenge Janet's father's death, but the two were really not meant to be. They had a strange relationship in the beginning, with Janet almost being presented as younger than she was. This was not helped by the fact that Hank always seemed to be mentoring her, helping her to develop as a hero, and kind of babying her sometimes, or looking after her, making the relationship seem like it was just weird and doomed from the beginning. It all went sideways when Hank's mental health started to deteriorate. He had never felt confident enough to propose to Janet, believing he wasn't worthy of her. But after a few mental breaks, he had adopted the alternate personality of Yellow Jacket, a strong-willed and almost manic persona. He broke into the Avengers mansion and kidnapped Janet and then proposed to her. To the surprise of all of the Avengers, but maybe not the readers, she said yes, having been waiting forever for him to pop the question. You know your wedding is a bad idea when it shocks the rest of your teammates, especially if your teammates are the Avengers. The two were married, and although Janet felt remorse for taking advantage of Hank while he was mentally unstable, she ultimately decided that it was fine. This of course led to Hank continuing to get even more manic and resulted in him being not just a bad hero, but a bad husband and partner when he slapped Janet after she expressed concern about one of his devious plots, knocking her to the ground. The two divorced, but years later, the two seemed to have resumed being romantically involved. What? Though at least Janet was smart enough to refuse his next marriage proposal. Good on ya. Number 2. Batman and Talia. Granted, Talia isn't so much a superhero, but she does often help Batman out. The two are originally pitched as star-crossed lovers in the comics from two different worlds. Batman is a vigilante and a hero, and Talia is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, leader of the League of Assassins. Part where this relationship goes too far is where somewhere down the line, DC decided to establish that the son that Talia and Batman have together is a product of rape. In the 1987 version of this story, Talia and Batman are practically married in Bruce's mind, and for all intents and purposes in love, while for a time, Ra's and Batman work together towards a common goal. During this time, Talia becomes pregnant but claims that she miscarried, though it is later revealed that she ended up having the baby. When the story of Batman and Son was retold in 2006, DC decided to change the details. In this retelling, Batman was drugged by Talia and raped, which is how Damian came to be. What's worse is the animated retelling of this story, where Batman isn't even mad about this revelation, and Talia seems to reminisce about the time she raped him, like creepily fondly. Why? Number 1. Hulk and She-Hulk. If you've watched some of our She-Hulk videos, you may have already heard me talk about this relationship that just really should have never happened. And if you haven't, you might be stunned that this even happened. There are a couple instances in the comics where this was maybe hinted at being a thing, but the most disturbing one is the Old Man Logan storyline, where Bruce and Jen apparently hook up in a post-apocalyptic future and have a whole brood of kids together. So, you know this happened more than once. It's also never really specified as to whether or not this was consensual, so that is also a huge issue when it comes to this awful incestuous relationship. Just try to close your eyes and just imagine that it never… Nope, not working, making me imagine it more. Ick.
Number 10. Deadpool and Spider-Man. Hold up, you're angrily typing. They're not together. Spideypool isn't real. It's not canon. How dare you? Well, hold on a moment. Spideypool may not be canonically in your face. They're not banging in the sky like some people on this list will be later on. But Deadpool has an open and acknowledged crush on Spidey. He loves him and will do anything for him. It's currently manifesting as a desire to be his friend and prove himself to be a good enough person to be said friend. And as for Spideypool, well, fan shipping of this couple is a big part of why these two got their own team-up comic, which lasted for 50 issues by the way, since it proved there was demand and an audience for it. There are many different sides of fandom and they impact it in different ways. Now when I say Deadpool will do anything, I mean anything, literally. He'll go to hell and back, let himself be stabbed, decapitated, and more, just for the hope that Spidey will spend more than 5 minutes with him. And he can be insulting him those whole 5 minutes, he'll take anything. So how is this too far? Well, when you're getting killed by the person you want to spend time with, but still are hanging out with them after, it goes too far. Sometimes it's just hard to read and it exacerbates Deadpool's instability at times. This arc ended with them going on a meta camping trip and Deadpool learning his identity, but oh snap, not really. Also there was a Gwenpool crossover and then they arrested the writer. Unless you love meta-ness, this whole thing was too far. Number 9. Batman and Black Canary. Sex. This is from All-Star Batman and Robin. So Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin has become infamous at this point. From the goddamn Batman line, to Robin being forced to eat rats, to the yellow room, to the non-smiling Joker full back tattoo. And one of the things that happened during all of this was Batman and Black Canary having sex while the corpses of people they had beaten up, or rather soon to be corpses since the building was on fire, well yeah, just sex right by that. So just them banging beside that. How could you do that? It would smell so bad. Why did this happen? Well, why not? I mean, this is the comic where when the instructions between writer and artist leaked or were released, Frank was demanding a full-on butt panel where the word balloons came from the butt and the instructions were to make him drool. So yeah, I'm not surprised this happened. Perhaps the worst thing about this whole comic was Miller becoming aware it was a meme and deciding to play into it, which wasn't always for the best. Number 8. Superman and Wonder Woman. So Superman and Wonder Woman have been toyed with as a couple for decades, and in the New 52 they just were a couple. But there have been times when these two together have gone too far. They're a power couple alright, but that's not always a good thing. So in the sequel to The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, Superman and Wonder Woman meet up in the sky for some sky sex, as you do. And well, it happens, and Wonder Woman proclaims, "It's so good, she's pregnant again." Instantly pregnant. That was a thing that happened, and it just breaks all mood or tone. Although people tend not to like the sequel as much as the first one anyway. However, more along the lines of going too far, we have Superman and Red Sun, the Elseworlds tale where Superman is raised in Soviet Russia and becomes a communist hero instead as a result. So here he ends up with Wonder Woman, who is impressed by him and falls for him, and ends up actually doing much of what he says without question, which leads to some questionable actions, especially as in the comic it's framed as they're pretty much oppressors. However, it all comes to a head when Superman commands her to break through her own lasso of truth which was binding her, which breaks her. She's never the same after. So too far. When you break one half of the couple, too far. Number 7. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Why hello Ultimate Verse, we meet again, but not for the last time. This is 1610, the Ultimate Verse, a universe started by Marvel in 2000 to attempt to entice new readers who may be scared off by Marvel's long backlog of canon, but they also decided to do things differently, different origins, etc. So one of the changes that took place was that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, twins, were in a relationship together. Why? Well, because. It was meant to build some pathos for Wanda, and because they could. And then they would get salty at Cap for not getting or liking their relationship. Pushing boundaries for no reason, well, that's going too far. Number 6. Superman and Power Girl. Yes, more incest. Hooray! Why not? This is about going too far after all. But now that I said that, there's gonna be at least one person who's like, how dare you? This is perfectly valid. Well, I brought it on myself. Superman and Power Girl, they're cousins. Now this is more of a passing thing, but it still warrants being brought up, as well Power Girl kisses Superman as a distraction tactic during a fight between the JSA and the JLA. She full on licks him. So a couple of things. 1, cousins, ew. And 2, she's Power Girl. She has the strength of Krypton. She doesn't need to resort to kissing as a distraction. Even when she's not Kryptonian, depending upon the canon, she's still really powerful. I mean, if the boob window isn't enough to distract, it's time for another tactic, cause something is clearly not working. Number 5. Reed and Sue. So Reed and Sue, for all their difficulties, do love each other and have a solid foundation and work together as a unit. So it is actually here that they go too far, which is something their own daughter Valeria accuses them of when she leaves to go live with Doom, her godfather, whom she calls Uncle Victor. She notes that her mother in particular co-signs her father's more questionable behaviors by staying with him, his cache of weapons to take out most of the major players in the Marvel Universe, the secrets he's kept from their very allies and friends, while he by contrast puts up with her almost dalliances and, well, her full-on emotional affair with Namor. The 2018 comic can say it's not canon all at once. I've read all the runs, and they were a thing. Sometimes standing by your man can make you end up co-signing some things, unless she's all for it, which would make sense. I mean, she wouldn't stay otherwise. A lot of this has changed now though, because the Fantastic Four have a more altered, different dynamic now, mostly Reed. Why do I want to see Reed with the Maker? Why do I want this? What's wrong with me? Send help. Number 4. Angel and Husk. This relationship is one that fans cannot really get behind, well, a lot of them, and it's also from a run that many don't particularly like. This was from the Uncanny X-Men and the storyline She Lies with Angels, and they really mean it, although they should have said She Flies with Angels. So there was always contention about this couple because of the age gap for some, this being between Angel, Warren Worthington, and Husk, Warren Worthington III. But then he spends the night talking to her mom, and she's all, why are you torturing yourself? Is it the age gap? Because I don't care, I ship it. But he's all, no, all the people I love died. And then Paige, that's Husk, comes in and is all, that's my decision. And they end up fighting outside in front of everyone. And he's all, I could love you more than Betsy. That's Psylocke. And wow, is that romantic? I guess so. They end up banging in the sky, full on, in front of the X-Men and her mom. Why would you do that? Too far. Number 3. Cyclops and Emma Frost. So Emma Frost and Cyclops' relationship begins as a psychic affair where she was counseling him over some of his, well, conflicting feelings about Jean and the Phoenix and everything that happened there. But she would also pretend to be Jean in these sessions, and stuff happened. However, at the end of that arc, Jean is all, you two can be together. And so they are, and they become quite the couple. And while Emma's anti-hero-ness combined with Cyclops' leadership style, abrasive, and his willingness to be clandestine and his more bitter approach after some reveals about Xavier, these two become quite a dangerous couple, a force to be reckoned with. When they make moves, the Marvel Universe is changed. Emma even uses Cyclops after his death as a psychic projection for their purposes. It's all pretty dark, and yet they work as a couple. Unpopular opinion, but I think they matched better than him and Jean. What are your thoughts? I'm sure you're leaving them down below. Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Vision. Scarlet Witch and Vision have quite the tangled web of relationship and history that has been polarizing for the very writers at Marvel, which led to some of the things that happen in the overall Marvel universe. So Vision has the brain patterns of Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch's previous romantic interest. It's the baseline of his interest in her, though it moves beyond that. These two, well, she's tried to destroy him more than once. Then there was the removal of their non-existent children at the time. It was more complicated now that children exist, it's a whole thing. Some of this was caused because writers hated their marriage. Comics are full of marriage haters. They feel it stagnates characters. I hope they aren't married, because if I was their partner, my feelings would be hurt. Feeling stagnant? Enjoy the couch. Not even the couch, the floor. The floor builds character. Vision modeled his robot wife's brainwaves off of Wanda, by the way. This whole thing is so tangled, and we got things like Avengers Disassembled and House of M, partially as a result of this romance. But they are iconic, but at the same time, yeah, it went a bit too far. And number 1, Batman and Batgirl. So we're actually not gonna talk about the rooftop sex that happened in the expanded beginning of The Killing Joke. We're gonna talk about the expanded DCAU verse in the comics, where the idea of a crush and then relationship between these two took full form. Despite Barbara at first being a romantic interest for Dick. I can hear you snickering. Stop it. So Bruce and Barbara would date, and for a while it would be a bit of an affair. And the Batman Beyond verse, it would be revealed that he had gotten Barbara pregnant, and she would actually end up miscarrying during a fight. This would be the start, well, the second start of the rift between Bruce and Dick, as well as the rift between him and Barbara. And rift between everybody. Everybody's got a rift now. Why did this happen? It's not a terrible plot line, but it's who's in it. Miscarriage for shock value. Too far.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Black Widow and Bruce Banner. Okay, remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming Banner down? They were in love, right? I mean, they were flirting at the beginning of the movie, and then even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws, haha, no sweat, brother. Like, it's a thing, it's happening. And then they're at Clint's secret little family farmhouse talking about running away together. And then after all of this, when Bruce returns to Earth, he says hi to Nat, and then she's like, hi Bruce, that's kind of it. Weird. Well, according to Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly tried to make this happen. We have scenes, we wrote them, we shot them, of the two of them hashing it out. You've been gone, I've moved on, that kind of stuff. It became very clear that it was a scene that was not really essential to the plot. It couldn't survive Infinity War. That thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. Couldn't wrap up loose threads just because you wanted to. I mean, that's fair, that's a good call. But I feel like Endgame, we could have spiced it up a little bit, no? I mean, Black Widow dies and Bruce like throws a bench, maybe like 90 yards. It's not even that big of a throw. I'd throw a fit. I'd throw a fit if Scarlett Johansson was my girlfriend and she died. I'd throw a big fit. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give us a like down below. The thumbs up right there, because it really helps us out here at our studio. You guys rock. Number 9, Hulk and Company. Okay, for this one, we go to Ultimate Wolverine vs. Hulk. So Wolverine at this point is a little occupied, okay? He's on the way to take out the Jolly Green Giant. So he heads to a Tibian town, he's tracking him, he's using his sense, and then finally, he gets his sights on him, and let's just say it's a sight you wouldn't forget. Yeah, he walks in on Hulk with not 1, not 2, but like 40 women. Hi Bruce, he says before popping out his claws. It's crazy Wolverine tracked him down by sniffing. I feel like he got to that door and was like, yeah, I'm gonna come back later. Something's wrong there. Something's not nice in there. Number 8, She-Hulk and Star Fox. Of course, I have to throw this one in the mix. So Eros, aka Star Fox, has this really messed up ability where he can make anybody he comes in contact with fall in love. Like Cupid, but with more yuck. Yeah, he even has the face of somebody who does weird shit like that. He looks like every Brad I've ever met. So the two of them hook up, and Jen even talked about how it was a great time. Okay. Cut to She-Hulk issue 6. Jen is defending Star Fox in a sexual assault case. And the question is, will this affect his Avengers status? Like, yes, most definitely. That's usually how this works. So Jen got to thinking, although she made the first move, did he make it happen? Well, it all ended up being consensual, and Arrow's love touch powers were deactivated. Probably for the better, because, well, I'll get into that a little bit later on. Number 7, She-Hulk and Juggernaut. Shifting over now to Uncanny X-Men 435, The Trial of Juggernaut. It's standard professional practice to not hook up with your clients. I mean, I think, especially if that client is a big bad. So Jennifer Walters at this point was representing Juggernaut. And then in a moment of heroic actions, Juggernaut kind of proves he's not all bad. He doesn't like save a cat out of a tree or anything remarkable, he just decides not to kill a guard. So Jen Walters is like, huh, interesting. Is this a scam? I wonder. Why didn't you escape? He's like, I don't know, man. My dad was a rocket scientist. I've always been a failure. Women's rights are the best. I'm a huge Jets fan. That's literally how it goes. And then Jen's like, oh, and it gets her attention because in the next page, the room is a goddamn mess. The bed has broken into the ground. The lamp is busted. And guys, worst of all, the windows are wide open. They didn't even try and close the curtains a foot. There's like nothing. It's just all glass. Freaks. You're freaks. Number 6. Hulk and She-Hulk. I'll be honest, I was gonna save this one for number 1 on the list, but I didn't want this video to end and then have you guys sitting there like, gross. So in the Old Man Logan storyline, it gets a little ew. We have this gang. The Hulk gang. Yeah, sounds pretty sick, right? They go around bashing people in who don't pay rent. Hell, if that was a Disney Plus show that was announced, I'd be so pumped. Oh wait, Hulk gang is the result of She-Hulk and the Hulk having kids together? I feel like I've said enough already, so now allow me to show you enough. Yep, yuck that. No way. Number 5, Hercules and She-Hulk. She's had a crush on Hercules for a while. I mean, I feel like most of us did growing up, no? He looks similar to Star Fox, so clearly she's got a type. In She-Hulk issue 30, it opens with this shot. She's expressing how if she's gonna fall off the wagon, it could be worse than having it be with Hercules. I mean, fair. But how does something like this actually come to fruition? Well, she mentioned falling off the wagon, but the only wagon that's falling is Hercules' wagon right into the palm of her hand. That's right, a move she picked up from the X-Men. She straight up grabs Hercules by his bum bum and then just hucks him at their giant-sized enemy, which is a great power move, something we almost saw last year in Endgame, actually. Yeah, Ant-Man was gonna throw the Hulk, who's gonna throw Spider-Man, and then he would have probably died. That's a lot of power. So this plus taking down an enemy together, things are heating up. There's a lot of chemistry, a lot of chemistry. After all, once you use somebody's assets like that, the rest kind of makes sense. I mean, maybe not in an RV in a parking lot, but hey, I'm not judging. Number 4, She-Hulk and Tony Stark. I mean, it was only a matter of time before these two crossed paths and did the dirty. So they're both known for their crazy hookups. And then in She-Hulk issue 17, we see it go down. But it's different, okay? So Tony at this time is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jen Walters at this point was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it all starts with a debriefing. Of course, a debriefing. Now, was the debriefing professional in any manner? Do we have PowerPoints and laser pointers? No, we didn't. No. Tony gets a candlelit dinner aboard the helicarrier. Even Clay Quarterman's like, hey, maybe I should debrief her. I don't know, just a thought. Get out of here, perv. The issue is interesting because like I said, they're both known to be the soups who get around town, but Tony gets treated like this cool playboy dude. They're like, yeah, keep doing it, man. Keep getting those girls. And then She-Hulk gets all the shame. The double standards here are nuts. So while they're about to open this conversation up, Tony starts to say, well, Jen, try looking at it from this angle. Bam, evil attacks in the form of robots. And they're not even out of bed yet. Great timing. She-Hulk's like, yeah, don't take this the wrong way, but you should definitely get dressed right now. It would have been a good conversation too. She-Hulk would have told them exactly what's up and the readers would have been like, okay, heard. Fair. Number 3, Kyra and the Hulk. Planet Hulk is a great run. We have this savage alien planet, barbarian tribes. It's kind of like Gladiator vibes, it's great. And when it comes to love, it's still in the air, just this time around it's a bit more of a duty rather than a passion. So we find Kyra Oldstrong and the two hit it off. Like, really quickly. Hulk comes out and asks her to be his queen. Just like that. Let's do it. Sure, Game of Thrones style. All right. Our guy doesn't waste any time. We'd love to see it. Then their wedding, shadow ceremony happens, and out comes 2 kids. After her death. Yeah, she gave birth to Scar and his evil other half, like in secret, Hero Kala. I wish we saw this unfold on Sakaar in the MCU. I feel like Ragnarok should have been a touch darker. All right, it was too fun. Sue me. I don't know. Number 2, She-Hulk and Man-Wolf. The son of J. Jonah Jameson, John Jameson, a lot of J's in there, got married to She-Hulk. Yeah, it was during the Civil War where the two had been dating and then decided to take it up a notch in the terms of holy matrimony. She loved him so much she would purposely try and stay in her human form because Man-Wolf preferred that. Gotta love controlling relationships. Sounds lovely, but this is a weird romance list, so there's more to it than just that. See, Man-Wolf and She-Hulk had a rocky relationship, so when they got married, it was kind of weird. You're like, do they love each other? Is this kind of... He's really controlling and he's weird. Well, it turns out their love wasn't so natural after all. Star Fox, that weirdo that I mentioned earlier in this list, he was using his powers, his love powers, to make them love each other. So it was never really authentic. It's all a sham. So when she finds out, not only is she hurt and heartbroken, but she quickly slides over those divorce papers and Man-Wolf and her go separate ways. But it wasn't easy for Man-Wolf. I mean, Jen Walters is a catch. I'd be pretty upset too. I'd be like crying and signing, tears would be dripping onto the paper. Oops, gotta get another one. And finally, number 1, Hawkeye, and She-Hulk. Okay, with all these new Disney shows being announced, there's like 50 of them, I swear. One of them that I'm most excited for is the animated What If series. There's a lot of fun and a lot of weird in these comics. Like Volume 2, Issue 114, for example, we see Jen Walters and Hawkeye have a kid. Yeah, they name him CJ, little Clint Jr. He shares both skills of his parents, that of being green and lean, while also knowing how to shoot an arrow. It's a great combo. You're gonna get a lot of shit done. You're gonna kill it at birthday parties. This all happens when the Beyonders assemble heroes and villains to scrap it out during the events of Secret Wars on Battleworld. But what if they never left after they settled a truce? Although we don't see the two in their awkward flirting, what's your favorite color? Stages, they seem to hit it off really quite well. I love the what if stuff. I mean, Captain America and Rogue, I mean, that alone is just, there's a lot of crazy in there.
Number 10, Captain Marvel. I can't deny, I actually kind of like this ship, but it still feels pretty out of left field, especially if you're more of a cinematic Marvel fan, and that's where a lot of your knowledge comes from. And even if you're not, while there has been quite a bit of flirting between the two in the comics, I would have never expected either hero to actually act on those flirtations and possible feelings. Anyways, Carol basically had a bit of a crush on Spidey, which has come up multiple times in the past, and both were close friends due to their time working side by side on the Avengers. While Carol herself tends to be a bit more serious and Peter is a bit more silly, the two have some pretty adorable interactions, and they also have a lot of strong mutual respect, which is what it's all about when it comes to romance, baby. They went on a date back when Carol was still operating under her Miss Marvel mantle, but her crush has also come up a few times since then. Spider-Man bartered to get that initial date with her in exchange for basically his superhero help. The date was awkward, but it ended on a not so bad note when both heroes kind of realized they were just working way too hard to impress the other person instead of just being themselves, which is also what romance should be all about, just being yourselves. Also, I like that I did this when I was talking about people having mutual respect. Like, this is fighting. I don't know why I did this, but you know, mutual respect. So we did see them go on that one date, however, we have not seen them date since, even though it went pretty well by the end of it. Number 9, Deadpool. Okay, so this one isn't an official romance, more of a bromance, but it's shipped enough by people that we could consider it a fan-based pseudo-romance, which, yeah, is a thing I just made up now, so that's a thing now. Fan-based pseudo-romances. That's a term. Basically, Deadpool is borderline in love and obsessed with Spider-Man. It's pretty one-sided for the most part, but the two do have their moments, and there are times when Deadpool even inspires Spider-Man, or at least makes Peter consider Deadpool's maybe not as terrible and as annoying as he originally thought. The two have helped each other out multiple times and even have a whole team-up series together, and it lasted 3 years. It's pretty romantic. Number 8, Mary Jane Watson. For this Spider-Man, we're not talking about Peter Parker, obviously. I'm not trying to argue that their relationship is weird, because, you know, it's been going on for a long time. Although at times, that relationship between Peter Parker and MJ definitely can be weird, I would argue. I'm actually talking about here the relationship between the Scarlet Spider and Mary Jane Watson, Ben Reilly, who for a time was also known as Spider-Man. While we don't actually see how their romance plays out in the alternate world belonging to Universe X, it is implied that the two had a daughter together there who grows up to become Spider-Girl. It's never explained how this came about, but the idea of Mary Jane ending up and settling down with Ben Reilly makes me wonder what happened to Peter in this alternate universe. Or is it possible that initially Mary Jane thought this was Peter, with Ben being himself a clone of Parker? I have so many questions. Number 7, Ultimate Katie Bishop. This weird romance belongs to the Spider-Man known as Miles Morales. What's the deal with this relationship? Well, in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, Kate Bishop is not like the one we have in Earth 616. She isn't Hawkeye's apprentice, nor does she become Hawkeye in this reality. Instead, we learn she is dating Miles Morales and is just a normal student. Or so it seems. In reality, her parents are Hydra agents who sedate Miles when he visits and then kidnap him and experiment on him, alongside Dr. Doom. Ultimate Dr. Doom. Fortunately, he does manage to escape and of course decides to break up with Katie before leaving. Gotta love those extreme ultimate romances. So weird. I also like that Miles was like, yeah, so you guys like kidnapped me and experimented on me, so I think I'm just gonna like break up? I think I'm just gonna break up with you, but this was weird. Thanks. It's like a weird way to end your relationship. Number 6, Jackpot. With Jackpot, it's all pretty confusing because we have Sarah Earhart, the real superpowered Jackpot, and Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot and uses drugs to give herself powers so she can become a hero. Here we are mostly talking about Alana Jobson. Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot. While Alana herself is implied as being attracted to Sarah, when posing as Jackpot and fighting alongside Spider-Man, he initially thinks that she might be his ex-girlfriend Mary Jane. The two of them have a few flirty moments while fighting together. Jackpot even calls him Tiger, considering the name of her character is obviously meant to be a play on Mary Jane's famous catchphrase, "You just hit the jackpot, Tiger." This is also what compels Spider-Man to want to learn more about the new superhero. In reality, Alana Jobson is paying Sarah to use her superhero identity and registration papers, because she just really wants to be a hero. She ends up dying as a result of this desire when the superpower-inducing drugs and hormones she uses together end up killing her when mixed with a blindness serum, despite Spider-Man successfully giving her the antidote to said serum. This romance never really goes anywhere, it just ends in tragedy. Number 6. Emma Frost. This one is pretty strange, but it's also coming at us from an alternate reality, so you know, you kinda just gotta go with it. I think what really shocked me about it though is that Kitty Pryde and Peter Parker were also known to date in the Ultimate Universe, and so I've always kind of thought of Kitty as being, you know, quite younger than Emma, and that was the thing that made me go like, wait, what? So how old? What's happening? So I was just confused in general by that logic, although this is comics, so while in some realities characters may have a greater age gap, in others they may actually be the exact same age, closing that gap completely. And in this comic, that is what is happening. In Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, which takes place in the alternate reality of Earth 20051, both Emma Frost and her BFF Shat Sandoval had a crush on Spidey, and Emma Frost is the same age as him here, so it's not weird. It's a little weird, but it's not weird. Emma, being a telepath, used her powers to uncover his secret identity, and she causes a bit of trouble when Chad and Peter start dating. Eventually, her trickery, however, is exposed, and she's forced to face the consequences of her actions. Here, Emma Frost is known by the codename Silencer, and ends up becoming an ally to both Chad and Spider-Man later on. Number 4. Black Widow. The strange thing is, while this happened in Marvel Team Up issue number 82 as a quick little thing, when Black Widow loses her memory temporarily, it also has been a comic ship in an alternate world where there is an amalgam alternate version of Black Widow who is basically a blend of both Black Widow and Black Cat, which yes, is one of the coolest alternates for both Black Cat and Black Widow. I know, it's pretty great. The issue where these two, however, initially hook up comes to us from way back before that. How it ends up happening is Spider-Man saves the day for Black Widow, who at the time believes she is a school teacher named Nancy Rushman. The other weird thing is that Natasha has also lost her memories of who she is, but has managed to retain her fighting know-how, and also assists Spider-Man with apprehending criminals, not thinking that it is weird at all for her to be doing. But, you know, I guess the fighting know-how maybe is in her physical memory? I don't know how that all works, but brains, stuff, wiring. Physical memory? Spider-Man recognizes her and recognizes that her being enamored with him is admittedly pretty weird, as is the fact that she thinks she's a woman named Nancy Rushman when she's not. Once her memories are back, Black Widow is over the flirtation and basically just dips at the end of the issue. She's like, this was cool, but also not into you. Bye. Only me as Nancy Rushman was into you, Spider-Man, sorry about that. Number 3. Spider-Woman. While this isn't an official thing that has happened as of yet, we have gotten quite a few flirty moments between Spider-Man and Jessica Drew from Brian Michael Bendis' run on the Avengers. They weren't full-on shipped, but there was definitely some suggestive light shipping happening there. At one point when they are teamed up, Jessica even scans Spider-Man to make sure he's not a Skrull, just because she finds him to be so strange. His response was to ask if they were on a date. I guess he's just used to women calling him weird on dates, which kind of makes sense because Peter Parker is pretty awkward and weird. Fair enough. Number 2. Silk. One of the strangest romances that Peter has ever had is with another one of the Spider folks, Silk, Cindy Moon. Apparently they were both bit by the same radioactive spider, which is why they believe they are so irresistibly infatuated with one another. Either that or they just are inexplicably attracted to each other. The whole fact that they don't seem to have control of their physical urge to be together makes this relationship one of the weirdest that Peter has ever had, and kind of one of the most uncomfortable uncomfortable in my opinion, especially as even when they're in danger, they just feel the urge to like just get physical instead of, you know, dealing with the problem at hand. Like their attraction to one another not only seems to be completely uncontrollable, but it can also potentially endanger innocent lives, or their own lives even. Number 1. Marrow. Yep, probably one of the weirdest relationships that's happened out there for Peter Parker. There was a random time that he briefly dated Marrow. Why? Well, I don't know, cause comics. These two dated very briefly and even had a team-up one-shot titled Spider-Man Marrow in the early 2000s, which delved into their brief relationship and Marrow's change in personality. Their relationship ended after Marrow realized she wasn't really herself, as she was being brainwashed and used by S.H.I.E.L.D. to hunt down life model decoys. After she regained her memories, she escaped S.H.I.E.L.D., but the two ultimately broke up because yeah, I mean she hadn't quite been herself basically throughout their relationship, so that'll do it. Oh, also she was a student at ESU where Peter was guest lecturing as a grad student, and Sarah refers to him multiple times in this issue as Mr. Parker, which I cannot deny I found quite a bit creepy. If you're calling your partner Mr. something, I don't know about that. Seems weird. Maybe that's just me. Number 10. Candace Nelson. That time when Daredevil very briefly dated Foggy Nelson's sister. Oh yeah, Foggy has a sister. Apparently, this happened so quickly it's basically the smallest blip on Daredevil's love line, I'm sure, when it comes to POM ratings. Candace is Foggy Nelson's younger sister who is studying journalism at ESU and ended up doing some snooping and attempted to expose the government and university for some involvement in some super shady activity. She and Foggy have always been at odds because she sees him as the way too stiff establishment type, and he sees her as the rebel who thinks that she's above the law. In the end, she and Daredevil had a bit of a thing at a time when Daredevil was pretty much wanted by every woman who appeared in his comic, including Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. Oh, and after years of being friends with Foggy, Matt didn't even know that he had a sister till we got past the 100th issue of Daredevil, which is pretty weird. It's also implied later on that she is way too young for Matt. Also, her face is something else in that whole issue where that comes up. She's like, I missed you. And I'm like, what's going on? You look crazy, Candace. Number 9. Elektra. While Elektra may be one of Daredevil's greatest loves, it doesn't mean she can't be one of the strangest as well. It all boils down to the fact that Elektra is a really intense anti-hero when she's not busy being a villain. She's an assassin who has zero qualms with killing anyone in her way, which makes those two a kind of strange match. However, their costumes match really well, which is likely meant to symbolize some of the similarities that these two have. They are both intensely skilled fighters with a lot of darkness in their past and their present, to be honest. Their present. Well, yeah, because Elektra did come back to life, so it did happen. She has a present, even though she did. However, Elektra kind of paved the way for all the death and destruction, it seems, that dating Daredevil seems to bring to most of his partners. So there's also that. Number 8. Becky Blake. This is a pretty weird one, mostly just because it seems like Becky Blake and Matt's relationship is a very one-sided and has always remained that way, and yet Becky never gives up. But also because Becky is another character who has just suffered a lot of trauma and tragedy, some of which was caused by Matt Murdock himself and some of which was not. While many people might know Karen Page as the sole secretary for Nelson and Murdock, after there was Karen, there was Becky. Becky herself lost the use of her legs after suffering an attack by Michael Reese, whom Murdock would later bring to justice. Becky would consistently express her feelings for Matt, who seemed conflicted before deciding he wasn't interested. Maybe it was his relationship with Karen, which was also a huge mess, that ultimately affected his decision. Either way, Karen remained a friend to Matt for a long time despite all the crazy stuff he put her through. In fact, she even also became a lawyer and joined their firm for a while. Eventually, however, she chose to firmly distance herself from both Matt and Foggy after having a near-death experience and felt that Matt Murdock was no longer worthy of her trust. And she was like desperate for him for so long, and I'm just like, wow, that one thing though, she's like, and that's it. I was super into you, but I can't anymore. Number 7. Moondragon. Yeah, this was a weird one. A brief one, but a weird one. Daredevil and Moondragon had a brief infatuation with one another in Daredevil issue 108. After he leaves Natasha, Black Widow, who also has the hots for him, she mourns the loss of Matt, knowing that he has eyes for Moondragon. What? Okay, so even if we ignore the fact that Moondragon is usually presented later as being a gay character in the comics, this is still a really weird ship. The two are described as being inexplicably drawn to one another but ultimately decide to go their separate ways because because they are galaxies apart. Well, literally. I also love that Moondragon originally explains that they can't be together because of their respective orientations toward life in the cosmos. Apparently. They also, I believe, one time like psychically mind melded, which is pretty sexy for Moondragon, I think. She's like, let me get into that beautiful, brilliant mind. Number 6, Dakota North. I mean, this one made sense in terms of how it kind of came about, and it wasn't a full-on romance specifically, but these two did hook up. It all went down after Matt had suffered a pretty big loss and was still technically married. After the hookup, the not so great part was that pictures of these two doing the deed were circulated, because Kingpin is obsessed in every way possible you can imagine with Daredevil. They ended up on the front page of all the newspapers, which was super awkward for both Dakota and Matt, and also for a time cost Dakota North pretty unfairly, if I might add, her reputation. Matt came out mostly unscathed though in comparison, although there was definitely a cost for him as well when it came to these pictures. The images made everything super weird between the two going forward. And kind of awkward for I think a lot of people in that comic. There were a lot of people that were like, what's happening? Number 5, Karen Page. Karen Page has to have one of the most tragic stories out of all of Daredevil's love interests. One of anyways, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of tragedy here. Karen and Matt had an on and off again romance that eventually resulted in Karen's death at the hands of Bullseye. Surprise, surprise. Karen betrayed Matt by selling out his secret identity due to a drug addiction. However, she did return to warn him afterward. In the end, Matt and Karen came back together despite the revelation that she had been the one to sell out his secret identity in this case and had betrayed him. She got clean and the two of them got back together. They would later break up again and get back together a few more times, with Karen even forgiving Daredevil for faking his death and helping him when he had a crisis where split personalities appeared to emerge, which kind of makes sense given his dating history, but we'll get to that later. They had the most rocky romance likely in comic book history overall, and Karen actually gave her life to save Daredevil. But also she went through some crazy stuff, I feel like, because of Daredevil. Poor Karen Page. R.I.P. Number 4, Mila Donovan. There are fates worse than death, and that seems to be what Mila Donovan got when it comes to her relationship with Daredevil. She was driven insane by Mr. Fear, who had been targeting her for months and posing as her therapist after she ended up marrying Matt Murdock. She was driven insane, killed someone as a result, and ended up being locked away for her own good when private care also wasn't working for her. In the end, her husband Matt was denied visitation rights while Mila was in treatment, as it was believed that he was actually the cause of all of her problems. Yikes. Her parents attempted to get custody of Mila again after they learned of everything that had happened to their daughter and blamed Matt, which is, is kind of fair, to be honest. In the end, Matt agreed to their request after pictures of him sleeping with Dakota North surfaced. Overall, he was just going through a lot and he needed a shoulder to cry on, which ended up turning into a weird relationship with Dakota, which we talked about earlier. Matt had been attempting to lobby to get Mila freed from the mental institution, but in the end, he acknowledged that he just needed to let her go. Bullseye did attempt to kill her when she was made one of his targets, but fortunately, Daredevil had already predicted this play and had Black Widow on standby to protect Mila. All in all, this relationship became all kinds of messed up, and I'm still amazed that Mila is alive today. And before we move on to our number 3 spot, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you can, if you will. It really does help us out here at the channel, and thank you for doing so. Number 3, Heather Glenn. Heather Glenn is another weird partner for Daredevil in that her story was also deeply tragic. I guess this is becoming no longer weird since everybody's story is deeply tragic. She was a beneficiary of his, a wealthy socialite that he ended up dating. In his Daredevil guise, he ended up saving her father from Purple Man, Kilgrave, who had been controlling him. However, her father was so distraught when he found out all that the Purple Man had made him do that he still took his own life while he was in prison. In the end, his daughter would follow suit. She blamed Daredevil for her father's death and attempted to betray his secret identity multiple times to get back at him. Still, somehow, Matt got past that and Heather got past her own hatred of DD, and the two ended up engaged. In the end, however, Heather took her own life, hanging herself after she became distraught when criminals destroyed her business, which, of course, she also blamed Daredevil for, and which he once again may have deserved that blame. Maybe. Number 2, Black Cat. This is a pretty random one. Black Cat isn't someone you'd associate with Daredevil, mostly because she is usually so obsessed with Spider-Man that everyone she has ever been with outside of Peter Parker tends to have to do with some kind of play of getting back at him or something to do with Peter himself. For Black Cat, it's usually all about Spider-Man. So, how did this come about? Well, it all went down when Spider-Man recruited Daredevil to help him free Black Cat from prison. But while they were developing a legal strategy, Black Cat herself escaped and the two of them had to track her down. It was during this time that Daredevil developed an attraction to Black Cat and she to him. Although for Black Cat, there still really only seems to be one true superhero for her, as both she and Daredevil admitted that their relationship was more of a fun physical thing than anything serious. Although I guess I'm not super surprised that they're attracted to each other because they're both like hotties, but I'm also just like, this is like a random thing that someone was like, what if they got together? Everyone's like, I mean, I guess why not? Number 1, Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary has got to be one of the strangest pairings for Matt, especially considering he was the one that caused all the grief in her life after he knocked her out of a window. True story. This trauma brought forth from Mary 3 split personalities, at least 3, which are later kind of explained as being part of past trauma, but were kind of just triggered into resurfacing by Matt's accidental influence. By his accidental violence, really. Still, you can pretty much blame Matt for creating the villain that became Typhoid Mary. One of these personalities was that villain, another was hypersexual, and the third was much more modest in comparison to the other two. I guess the most normal of all 3 personalities, really. These are the most commonly acknowledged personalities, but she also appears to have other lesser utilized personalities when it comes to the comics, such as Mutant Zero. Daredevil for a time was involved with all 3 of her main personalities, but it gets weirder. A frequent ally of the Kingpin, Mary has also attempted to kill Matt multiple times. Oh, and while she is a mutant, she only seems to be able to access her mutant abilities through certain personalities. Weird. Number 10, Venom and Clint Barton. Things get pretty weirdly kinky with these two characters in the New Avengers Annual issue number 3 from 2009. Here we see what happens to Clint after he goes after Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. He is being held as a prisoner and is being interrogated. I don't know if we'd call this so much a romance as a weird, sexy monster moment, but it's definitely notable enough to receive a mention. Here Venom is bonded with Matt Gargan, Hawkeye is naked, and Venom is seen licking him from behind and very loosely and suggestively choking him, while Norman asks him where the other true Avengers are hiding out. It's all very sensual in a way that is odd and to me definitely implies Venom or Mac or some combination basically consider Hawkeye to be a hottie. That's how it's made to look anyways. I can't blame them though, I feel like Clint Barton is definitely a hottie, so yeah. Number 9, Flash Thompson and Valkyrie. This was a relationship that happened during the Secret Avengers when Flash Thompson as Agent Venom was on the team. I know I said I'd be focusing on Eddie Brock and Venom relationships, but this one also technically involves Venom through Flash and is too weird for me to just not include. Also, Flash was Agent Venom for quite a while in the comics, so I feel like we can just definitely count him in. This relationship was more strange because it was just so out of the blue. I don't have anything against it, but even Valkyrie Brunhilde acknowledged the awkwardness and decided to take matters into her own hands by basically jumping Flash Thompson's bones. It was a strange, secret relationship, but I guess what do you expect on the Secret Avengers? Seems oddly fitting, if not a bit abrupt. Alright friends, before we move on to that next point, it's that part of the video where I do the YouTube thing and I say, hey, click this like cause it helps us. But seriously, click this like cause it helps us. Number 8, Venom and Mary Jane. Another strange romance for sure. Venom basically left MJ traumatized when the two first met to the point that she was terrified of them and has had various disturbing experiences with them throughout her history. And yet, this is comics and histories are long, so pretty much anyone can end up with anyone. Also, this is MJ and I feel like everyone just wants to ship her with everyone because, I mean, MJ's a hottie, so yeah. These two haven't gotten romantic in the traditional sense, but there have been a few moments where Venom has seemingly pined for Mary Jane, resenting the fact that Eddie always seems to get the girl, despite the fact that he is usually the one messing up those relationships. which is very strange, especially considering how much Venom seems to pine for Eddie, but anyways. Once again, Venom is definitely a jealous creature by nature, which we've seen time and time again in the comics. We have also seen the symbiote bond with Mary Jane, much to her own chagrin, and despite the likely conflicted feelings of MJ fans at this happening. But yeah, it's a weird and problematic thing, and it's there. So let's just acknowledge it. Number 7. Eddie Brock and Liz Allen. A romance that never really amounted to anything other than Eddie trying to make a move on Liz, who pretty much just always rejects him. This attempt at a romance was made even weirder too when Venom revealed their jealousy of Liz, although I get it, they want Eddie all to themselves. Why bother with Liz when Eddie has a perfectly good romantic partner in Venom? The whole thing is pretty weird though, Venom feeling the need to compete with Liz for Eddie's attention, when really, who has more of Eddie's time than Venom themselves? They basically have a monopoly on it. They spend most of their time bonded to the guy, but the whole exchange here is made even more strange by the fact that Liz doesn't really reciprocate Eddie's romantic interest to begin with. So there isn't that much even for Venom to be jealous of, other than I guess Eddie's wandering eye. Venom's like, Eddie, I see your eyes wandering, and just look at me. Just look at your symbiote. Look at yourself in the mirror, basically. Number 6. Venom and Spider-Man. One of the greatest unrequited love stories of all time. Poor Venom just wanted to bond with Spider-Man, but Spider-Man was having none of it. This was truly a rough time for the symbiote, who just was getting rejected left, right, and center until he fell into the lap of Eddie Brock, who seemed to also share his hatred for Spider-Man, and the two basically encouraged a sense of hate and kinda rage in one another initially because of this negative experience that Venom had originally with Peter Parker. If you don't believe me that this was a romance of sorts, just look at the name of the issue where the two kind of break up more permanently in Web of Spider-Man. The name of the story where the suit attempts to once more bond to Peter unsuccessfully, who shakes it off with the sonic disruptance of some loud bells ringing, is called Till Death Do Us Part. Sounds pretty romantic to me. Definitely some strange, sad, and unrequited love there. Poor Venom, they're always being rejected by Spider-Man, continuously. Number 5. Venom and Lee Price. Lee Price really messed up Venom. Their relationship was weird in the worst of ways. Venom bonded to Lee when it was desperate for a host, but Lee ended up taking control of the symbiote and using it to do all kinds of terrible things and kill people. Not that the symbiote hadn't killed people before, I mean it had, but the huge difference here was this was very much against Venom's will, and Price would often use it to target people regardless of their alignment, which Venom has always been conflicted about, while with Eddie it was against hurting innocents for the most part. But Lee didn't care about what Venom wanted or its feelings. Basically, this relationship between Price and Venom, while not inherently romantic explicitly, was meant to symbolize the most toxic kind of romantic relationship. An abusive one. Number 4. Venom and Beck Underwood. This one was pretty weird because Beck seemed to be super into it at first. Well, I mean for a time anyways. Like most people, she ended up ultimately being turned off by the whole combo deal of Venom and Eddie Brock together. In the end, the whole dating of both the symbiote and Eddie ended up just being too much for her. It got pretty strange too when Beck asked Eddie about his relationship with the suit and wanted to make sure it was healthy. One of the things that I actually didn't really like about her was how she got kind of a bit judgy when she felt the need to seek clarity on if Eddie was really enamored with Venom because he just hadn't found an adequate and committed woman to settle down with. Let Eddie love his alien suit, I say. Just let it happen. But I totally understand that it can be a lot for someone to get involved with both Eddie Brock and, you know, the alien that is Venom. That's a lot. In the end, the two ended up parting on amicable terms, with Beck giving both Eddie and Venom one last kiss and hug. And Venom was also super heartbroken about it. They were like, no, please don't leave us. Number 3. Eddie Brock and Ashley Kafka. This one comes to us not from the comics, but instead from the Spider-Man animated series out of the 90s. Here, Dr. Ashley Kafka was the person treating Eddie Brock during his time at Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane. Eddie insisted that he was Venom, but Dr. Kafka believed that he was just delusional and that stress had basically caused him to lash out and to believe that he was the villain Venom, when he actually wasn't. This relationship was weird on the premise that it was a patient and doctor relationship turned romance, and the fact that both fell in love with one another while Ashley kinda thought Eddie was imagining being Venom and was at the time insane. So Yeah. It got even weirder when Carnage got involved and caused a bunch of chaos that caused Eddie to save the day once reunited with the Venom symbiote. In the end, they were unable to be together as Venom got sucked into a magical portal in order to save Ashley. Don't you just hate it when a magical portal and multiple villains prevent you from being with the one you love? I know I do. Number 2, Eddie Brock and Anne Wang. And Venom? This relationship basically got super weird in a bad way for Anne when Venom got involved. Anne and Eddie were originally married, but after Eddie lost his dad and his job, Anne couldn't take sort of the dark path that he was headed down and left him. This of course only put Eddie in an even darker place, and then he found the Venom symbiote. Together, their combined hatred for Spider-Man turned them into a villain, but Eddie still longed for Anne and wanted to make things right. They kind of ended up back together for a bit, but this also made things worse for Anne, who was left traumatized and feeling violated after bonding with Venom herself. She didn't like the person that she and the symbiote were together, She-Venom, nor what it did to Eddie. And it was all this trauma that actually caused Anne to be unable to leave her apartment for months, and later resulted in her taking her own life after Eddie and Venom confronted her once more and were super clueless when it came to just how fragile Anne's emotional and mental state was at the time. Because Spider-Man was also present at the time and also freaking Anne out though, Eddie of course continued to blame him for his problems and for the death of his ex-wife. Number 1. Symbrock. This is really the love story for the ages, but is also one of the strangest ones out there. Eddie falling in love with a symbiotic alien suit who it turns out is its own living entity, and vice versa. This is confirmed in the comics as the two have expressed their love for one another and even at times bickered like a married couple. They also call each other things like love and dear, so yeah, that's pretty coupley in my opinion. Not only that, but Eddie has helped Venom deliver children, even though those children are technically kinda just Venom's who reproduces asexually. But still, Venom considered Eddie to basically be the father of their children, so yeah. And also, Eddie helped the symbiote to deliver, in essence, their symbiote child together, Sleeper, bonding with Venom while it was in essence giving birth. This labor was a hard one, and Eddie bonded with Venom to help it through and to help stabilize his partner, not just in this labor, but also in heroics, crime, and in a way, love. Aside from this moment, we have seen tons of other moments where the pair chose to be together and support one another in a pretty intimate way. At the end of the day, these two together are one of the weirdest and sweetest romances on this list.